welcome to the Jason Jones Show. I am your host, Jason Jones, on with one of my heroes, and one of your heroes, Scott Horton, the director of the Libertarian Institute, host of the Scott Horton Show, and the Flavor Flav / editorial director of antiwar.com. And I wanted to have Scott on because for the first time ever, this time we're going to have not only one regime change war, but maybe two, and they're both going to be great this time. And the propaganda is really selling me on that. And so I'm sure Scott is going to be on board this time too. I can't wait to hear all the reasons why this time these regime change wars are not going to end in catastrophic failure. Scott Horton, welcome to the Jason Jones Show.
Hi, great to be with you, Jason. I'm sorry, I am not going to shovel that load of shit for you today. I'm a pessimist when it comes to these things. Although,
What?
listen, at the time we're recording this on Thursday afternoon, Donald Trump did not bomb Iran last night, and all signals are that he's backing down, at least for now. So I tend to be even too optimistic when it comes to short-term alarmism about whether we're actually going to do the next thing tomorrow or not. I even err on the side of too much caution instead of alarm sometimes, unfortunately. However, once you go knocking dominoes down, I don't want to get out in front of everyone predicting the worst, but I'll just tell you that I fear for the worst. And that includes the current situation in Venezuela, even such as it is, which is, stable for now. But I'm just absolutely terrified about the consequences of a full-scale regime change war in Iran and what that could lead to. But again, I think others, even those with power, share my fears there to a degree too, and that we do have that going for us a bit.
Oh, Scott, I think I may even be more pessimistic than you. I'm not kidding, though. When I listen to the pundits speak, I've been opposed to every major war since I got out of the infantry in 1995, out of the reserves, the active duty in 93. And I guess my red pill moment was as a young infantryman, I was really driven into like a homicidal frenzy when I saw the propaganda about Iraqi soldiers going into Kuwait and bayoneting children in incubators. When I saw the powerful testimony from that sobbing Kuwaiti girl that turned out was a Georgetown visitation the whole time and hadn't been to Kuwait in years, and her father was the ambassador. That's what really kind of thrusted me into the anti-war movement. But even then, every time they try to sell a war, I can feel they're hitting all the right tumblers, to open up
That's a good way to put it.
to my intellect. I'm like, wow, they're manipulating even me. But of course, I'm a man. When I was a boy, I used to read comic books, and they would advertise, you can get 2,000 soldiers, 500 tanks, 200 helicopters, 200 artillery pieces for $9.99. And they made it look like they were these big army men, and I'd order them, and they'd be this little microscopic hard plastic. Do you remember those guys?
Sure.
I ordered those sets 3 or 4 times thinking this time I'm going to get what I'm paying for and what they're selling. And so I've learned, as a boy, probably by the time I was 6, that was a fool's errand. Why do Bob Marley in his song Ambushed in the Night from 1975, he said that they say to us when they're selling the wars, he said they tell us what we know is what they know is what we teach them. What we know is what they teach us, and every time they reach us. And it does seem like what Bob Marley was saying is true, that everyone is against the last war. Everyone was always against the last war.
Yeah.
But this war, this is going to be a tremendous success. And so when I say I'm a pessimist, I worked in Afghanistan, I worked in Iraq, I walked through Iraq in the wake of the catastrophic, genocide perpetrated by ISIS. I walked through those villages where they were still smoldering. And I felt like that was the intent of the Iraq war. They got what they were looking for to destroy Iraq. I think the goal is to create chaos in Iran. And I think it's become so obvious when the protests were just beginning. You have the former head of the CIA going on X and tweeting, "Thanks to the people of Iran and the Mossad agents on the ground running next to them." Uh, I don't think he did that because he thought that would be a long-term good play for those activists. He was getting Iranians murdered and giving the regime justification to murder the protesters with that X post. So then I have to ask myself, the goal has always been failed states across the Middle East. Am I wrong there?
No, well, it depends on whose goal, right? I think, you know, um, it ain't a monolith. I think the Israelis, Netanyahu himself would love to see Iran probably just smash into as many pieces as possible, turn it into something like Syria was 15 years ago. Still kind of is, but um, I think there's got to be people, especially in the Pentagon, who are less ideological, who just think, look, you kill the Ayatollah and his ruling council and you get chaos. Well, that's overall bad for business because that could, destabilization here could affect our friends in northern Iraqi Kurdistan. It could affect our friends in Azerbaijan, the hereditary dictatorship America backs there, of course, and whatever other consequences, the price of oil and
That
whatever.
ethnically cleansed
So,
120,000 Christians 2 years ago with Israeli weapons. But I
oh,
digress.
yes, in Nagorno-Karabakh, yes, and with, in alliance with Israel, or with Israeli support, I guess. Um, but look, I mean, even just in the White House, like just assume for the sake of argument that Rubio and Hegseth are telling him, "Go ahead, boss, it'll be fun and cheap and easy." Somebody's telling him, "Well, there really could be cascading consequences of this that absorb, and subsume the rest of your presidency, sir. Because what would happen actually if the consequences spilled out here, there, and the other place, and another refugee crisis in Europe, and all of that." So, um, and I don't know exactly what Tucker told him, but Tucker had lunch with him last Friday and had to have told him that, like, man, believe me when I tell you, there's a lot of dudes out here who love you, but do not love this. You know what I mean? He must have said something like that. And so, the Washington Post story, for what it's worth, had JD Vance had his people tell the Post that he was against it and was urging caution. And you know what I mean? Like this kind of thing. So, and that Trump was concerned because he made them rehearse the Venezuela raid so many times. He told them, boys, you better nail this thing. And they did. Nobody on our side got killed. And it was straight out of it, not even a movie, but like even just a TV episode, man. Just went in there and did it. But
Well, no,
then, so on
again,
one hand,
my friends
just
who know
hang
I'm
on,
long
real
anti.
quick. On one hand, that was super easy, and he's really high on that. They're like, wow, actually, I can do whatever I want. Look how easy that was. On the other hand, what if it had gone wrong and he lost a Chinook full of guys? That would have looked really bad. And he even they quoted him, I think this is in the New York Times article. He talks about when Jimmy Carter had the failed Operation Eagle Claw in Iran in 1980 on the failed rescue mission. And now, oh man, that looked bad for Jimmy Carter. And that surely is part of why he lost to Ronald Reagan. And boy, that could have happened to me if that Venezuela thing went wrong, boy. So, like, he isn't that concerned about the future of Venezuela, but he is concerned about his own ass and how bad he would look. If he can get in there and out and make it nice and sweet and clean and spin it that way to his crowd on X, that's one thing. If he gets bogged down in a regime change and some kind of prolonged bombing campaign, or God forbid, troops on the ground in Persia trying to pick and choose winners and losers, he sees that as a threat to his own presidency, as he should. And so it does matter that even those of us regular people with no money or power out here in the country, and especially on the MAGA right and the America First right, that they make themselves heard, that they continue to speak up and say, again, we like you, but we don't like this. We don't want you to do this. And if he knows that, like, uh, picture him in the Oval Office imagining us was he's looking out the window, right? What does he think we think? Does he think we don't care, or he thinks we're for it, or he thinks we're stomping our foot pissed off because no, you promised not this. You were going to do that instead. And so if we can keep him feeling anxious about that, and that no, he really is risking his own base, like to a very bad degree, if he continues acting recklessly over there, I think that can really make the difference, man. That is the margin of his decision. We don't have the power. Obviously, Israel and Saudi and England and Qatar and whoever else has the power in Washington, but the voters are still the voters by and large, and he still needs them for the vote next fall for the House, and then for who's going to succeed him in the next presidential election as well. And so,
Well, Scott,
those
not
things
to blow
shoot down a
sunshine in
bit,
your
you know?
not not to blow sunshine in your direction, but
No, go ahead.
even but even that we're in this position to exert this kind of influence on the administration, really a lot of that credit goes to you, the Libertarian Institute, American
No, 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 no,
Conservative.
come on.
No, no, antiwar.com. I'm telling you, you guys are like in the trenches and you're only taking inches at a time, and it must be very frustrating. Um, but the fact that we're even in this position, I said to my wife today, I said, I think we stopped war with Iran. And she goes, oh, we? Are you part of the we? I said, yeah, I think we stopped this, I hope. And it's to your point. I think Tucker Carlson, J.D. Vance's career is over if we go to war with Iran. Tulsi would resign immediately, I have to suspect. And then she would be
I hope that's right.
counter-narrating, then she'd be countering the president every step of the way in the media, all the way into the next election. I can't imagine, and I think anyone with presidential aspirations in this administration that sticks around after war kicks off with Iran, I believe their career's over.
I agree. I think that's right. Look, I don't know what's going to happen even on the question of support for Israel next time. This is one of those things where there's just such a huge gap between the truth and the narrative that they push. And there's such a huge gap between what's right and what they're doing that, it's like a stretched rubber band. It's got to snap at some point or break. And you see a huge crack up on the left, especially where it's just clearly the owners of the party versus every last voter they got right on this issue. Who are just, on the right, the division is broader and they're more, right-wing Republican voters, who actually do really support Israel much more. But the people who don't, that number is growing, and especially among the young. And so the idea that somebody like Ted Cruz could just run on, you better love Israel more, boy, or else I don't care about you anyway. Guy like that's going to lose. He can't win. Somebody, even on the Republican side, they're going to have to figure out how to split that message. They're going to figure out, at the very worst, they're going to have to figure out how to tell their donors, listen, I've got to I got to split the difference on this message a little bit. But I promise to be your horrible, abject slave once I get elected. But don't abandon me if I say one reasonable thing sometimes. Because, right, if you think about like Charlie Kirk's letter to Netanyahu, I can't just keep shoveling this S, man. People won't take it from me. I have to let them have their say in the thing, or else I just look completely stupid now, right? He's like beseeching Netanyahu to understand the position that he was putting him in. I can't lead your Hezbollah brigade when everybody knows that, oh, look, it's the Hezbollah brigade. There has to be more to it, And so I don't know what's going to happen. I have to tell you, I don't. But I'm looking forward to seeing a big fight. It is going to be a great crack up in both parties over Israel. And, I'm sure you saw this clip where, I'm sorry, I don't remember who she was on the stage with, but it ain't matter. But it was at one of these things, I'm pretty sure, Jason, it was at the Talking Points thing, where one of these guys said to Megyn Kelly, yeah, the great crack up in the Republican Party going on because of Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens. And Megyn Kelly goes, no, you mean because of Israel. The great crack up because of Israel and because of Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens refusing to toe that line anymore. That's what you're talking about. let's not pretend that's not what we're talking about. And let's not pretend that we're talking about Israel being a nice little Jewish boy minding his own business and going about the world. And then all of a sudden people are being mean to him because you know how bullies are. The Israelis, their government certainly is the most barbarian force on the planet, the most criminal and
Just yesterday,
disgusting
the military
power in the world.
Yeah, just yesterday they went into the West Bank and began destroying farms, smashing eggs, beating women. I was there just 3 weeks ago, and as I was driving to Tebeh from Ramallah, going through the checkpoint, I see an elderly man and an elderly Palestinian woman on their knees with their hands over their head for like 5 minutes, on their knees like this for 5 minutes. An old couple. This is just all designed to harass them. And everyone is, it's not just a political crack up on both the left and the right. You know, what's great is, I always say this, most people aren't assholes. You know, most people don't like the idea of women and children being slaughtered or just stealing people's land. It's not something most people, and you're seeing this across the political spectrum, especially with the, like you said, the young. I just saw a study. I wrote an article a year ago saying the evangelical church was murdered in Gaza by the IDF. And I believe dispensational theology, these mega church movements, these large Christian Zionist churches and denominations, they're done. And a new study just came out yesterday. I saw it reported everywhere that in 1 year, it went from 21% of Gen Z identifying as Catholic to 23% in 1 year.
Wow.
And I really believe this swing is just beginning, and it all revolves around the young people being repulsed by this ethno-nationalist, apartheid, genocidal ideology of Zionism.
Yeah. You know, I was just being interviewed on another show before yours, and we were talking about just the footage. I mean, how could anyone forget what we've seen, what's happened in the Gaza Strip over the last couple of years? I got a very visual memory anyway, but I've seen a lot of dead kids, man, a lot of them, and I can still remember. You know, when I was a boy, we would pass around the VHS tape, Faces of Death.
I remember
Yeah.
that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
1,
Yeah,
2,
so
and
this is
3.
yeah, for you youngins, VHS was a magnetic tape of 180p video quality, whatever it was, 420 or something. Anyway, and they would have like, here's a picture of a dead body they found out in the woods, or here's a picture of a murder victim, or this kind of, and it was some pretty shocking, transgressive, crazy kind of stuff. And
And
the
it was rated
kookiest,
XXX, and you had to get
yeah,
it like in Chinatown behind a dumpster. Some guy was
yeah,
selling.
or
Yeah.
like, yeah, from somebody's older brother or something, you know,
Right.
for sure, right? And then like the most kind of weirdest of us would go ahead and like, yeah, I want to see Faces of Death 2 and 3 and 4, and like, oh,
Saw
I
them
can't get
all.
enough. Yeah, I'm such a hardcore horror movie kid or
None
whatever.
of us
But like,
wanted to see it, to be honest, Scott, but we wanted to impress our friends. Like, let's
yeah, or
watch this. We're so
yeah.
tough. And then let's laugh about it when
But the
it's.
truth was like, yeah, look, they never really ever showed that stuff. We had
That's
never
true.
seen that.
That's
And
true.
so for me, like, I wanted to see it.
The
I
grossest
did want
thing
to
we
see it.
saw was the monkey
Um,
brains.
but like, um, you know, well, I could make some kind of point about desensitization or whatever, but I guess that ain't it. It's you know, the shock of that from seeing it the first time, you know, when we're young kind of thing, to having that on your Twitter feed every day in like real time, and it's kids. I mean, I remember one that where they blew up the building across the street, and this little girl, her legs were blown off, and maybe her entire pelvis was blown off, I think. And the rest of her corpse was launched across the street and then landed hanged on the rebar. And her little arm is like her right arm is stuck behind her head somehow, and the bottom half of her is gone. And then she's just like crucified up there on the rebar hanging off the side of the rubble of this other building across the street. And like, this is pure Hitlerian, nightmarish. Like, this is as bad as it gets. This is as cruel as crime could ever be. And there's just no amount of spin that's going to take that back. There's never going to be able to undo that. You know, killing
They don't
some
know
guy
that,
and his
though.
little boy or whatever. There's a million of them. You all know. You all saw it too.
Yeah, well, Ozempic Pompeo was just I just saw him on I never recognized him because,
No, he looks so
he's
crazy now.
he's really changed his habits in life, I guess, and
He
lost
can
a lot of
still
weight.
eat potatoes sometimes or something, you know?
No,
It's
I think he
weird.
probably has no self-control, it's just all the drugs, but, this guy was on some panel saying, "We have to write the history of what happened in Gaza. It needs to be the Israelis were the victims because right now the world thinks Gaza's," and he's not arguing with the truth. He's saying we have to hide the truth
Right.
to future generations. Like they're very open about this. But to your point about young people, they're not desensitized. It's interesting to see the boomer class. And when Gen Z calls anyone over 26 a boomer, it kind of makes sense. I think Gen Z is different than the rest of us. Everyone born before them is different than they are because they were born with that smartphone. They were born in the age of social media. They were born in the age of app dating and prevalent pornography and death and destruction on your phone. And I think they look at the boomers like we're crazy. We're like we were when we were kids, watching Faces of Death, laughing to show how tough we are. You have Congressman Randy Fines when he's shown the picture of a dead baby. What does he say? Thanks for the pic. We need more of these. He's like a teenager trying to act tough in front of his friends, or he is a genocidal psychopath. I'm not sure which one
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah, it's the latter. But no,
It's
there's something to what you're saying there, though. No, that's true. And um, I don't know, man. I've personally, I've had it. Israel is by far the worst thing about America. To me, it's the same difference as if like we still had just one slave state where,
oh, that's a good. Have you used that analogy before?
yeah, like
I'm
it's a
gonna use
pretty
that.
obvious one.
We
Like,
still have one slave state. That is a
yeah,
great way of putting it.
yeah, in Louisiana. In fact, I had read where there were parts of Louisiana where they still literally did have chattel slavery through the 1960s. They finally, some federal cops went all the way into the backwoods of a couple of these counties and freed the very last of the slaves in the
Wow.
1960s. They were still being held there, dude. But like, that was like way, way back in the woods where like the deputy didn't go and whatever. And you know what I mean? I don't know. They finally rousted out the last of that. But like, what if it was just officially, it was still the law that like, well, yeah, we still in Louisiana, you can buy a woman and rape her and then sell her children and then sell her and beat her half to death and make her, cook your lunch or your dinner. What I like, but yeah, that level of just barbarianism of criminality. That's essentially the same thing as Israel. It's our 51st state. America's completely on the hook for their behavior in every way. I don't know if you saw this, but they interviewed Naftali Bennett the other day. And he said, I would be harsher than Netanyahu if it was me in there. And people don't know, but they should, that Naftali Bennett, he caused September 11th. He was the artillery officer who called in the strike on the UN shelter in Qana, Lebanon in 1996 during Grapes of Wrath and killed 106 women and children. And when Shimon Peres launched that operation, was when Mohammed Atta and his friend Ramzi bin al-Shibh decided to join al-Qaeda. And then after the Qana massacre, bin Laden talked about it in his first declaration of war against the American people in 1996. And when Ramzi bin al-Shibh and Mohammed Atta saw bin Laden's declaration of war, that was when they decided to go and join al-Qaeda and attack the United States, stopped in Chechnya and then went to Afghanistan and got recruited into the Plains plot. And so it was literally blowback from Naftali Bennett, this particular guy. He's been the prime minister of Israel before. He almost certainly will be again after Netanyahu, or, he's in the line of succession for sure to succeed him. And so September 11th is already blowback from that guy's criminal behavior before. And so this is the same kind of thing that we're playing with now. I mean, if Grapes of Wrath led to September 11th, then I
Oh,
hope
wow.
that whole, wind and whirlwind thing does not have to be proportionate. You know what I mean? Like whatever comeuppance America is due, I sure hope as hell, to hell that it is not as bad as what we, read then. They always say, oh, bless Israel to bless the United States. Did you notice that when America got hit on September 11th, Jerry Falwell did not say, oh my God, I guess I was wrong. By blessing Israel, we caused the September 11th attack to happen to us. And so actually we must have read that wrong. Blessing Israel curses your nation, I guess. No, what did he do? He said, this is because we let men kiss. That's why God let Satan get
Is that what it said?
retribution on our country, because we allow liberals to decide things, which he was right about how bad liberals are on a lot of things. But you notice that literally when going along with the Israeli government's crimes caused direct, massive, and disastrous blowback onto our country, that's not taken as an exception to their BS about how, your religion says that you must bless Israel so that God will bless you. I guess he was sleeping on September 11th, despite all of Jerry Falwell's and Ronald Reagan and George Bush and Bill Clinton's blessings for the Israeli state.
Maybe we didn't bless them enough.
I
Maybe
guess
there
that was it.
maybe there was something we didn't do that,
Johnson helped them get A bombs, but he didn't just hand them H bombs. That
yeah,
anti-Semite.
he didn't thank them for taking the H bombs.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question just about the anti-war movement in general. I look at the anti-war movement and it's diverse, and it seems to be becoming even more diverse. You sort of had the libertarian anti-war right, and then you had the anti-war left, and then kind of the strange, where I would always kind of fall in with like the Pat Buchanan types, and
Yeah.
but it just feels to me like the anti-war left is always a false front, that they're there in the beginning, but then when they matter, they disappear. Like it's almost astroturf designed to scare the common American away from opposing a war. So, if you want to oppose this, you're
Well,
nothing but a pink-haired communist, or is it just
I mean,
help me
I see what
understand the
you mean.
anti-war left or the dynamics of the anti-war movement?
Yeah, I mean, I see what you mean there, but I think that's really just more in effect. I mean, the reality is that that's just who liberals and hippies are, right? And they will go with the current thing, and if the current thing is opposing the Iraq War, then great. But they don't usually know that much about it. If you look at in the case of the Iraq War, they just did not trust W. Bush and Dick Cheney. These are Texas oil guys. They want to go to the Middle East. That's corrupt and criminal, and the other party, and they could be as upset as they wanted. You saw the Democratic Party climb on Cindy Sheehan's back in her protest movement of 2005. The mother of a dead soldier named Casey Sheehan, who was killed in Solder City in 2004. And she protested out at Bush's ranch, and who he refused to meet with her because he's such a pig. And anyway, so the Democrats pretended to care about her long enough to take over the House and the Senate in the elections of 06, and then immediately turned their back on the anti-war movement. Never met his Nancy Pelosi. And then came Barack Obama. Now, Barack Obama is black and one shade more liberal than Hillary on the scale, to the left of Hillary on the scale. So to progressive Democrat voter types, he was their dream come true, right? He was like on the surface, the exact opposite of Bush in every way, and had not supported the war. And so like he could have gone out on Fifth Avenue and shot somebody and they wouldn't have cared. You know what I mean? Same kind of dynamic. And then it's the same thing with
Well, then you
Trump.
saw John Brennan's drone war during the Obama
That's right.
administration.
And look, he tripled the war in
Thousands of civilians.
Afghanistan and they didn't mind. He did get us out of Iraq, but he tripled the war in Afghanistan, and the bet was, well, either I got to put up with John McCain and Lindsey Graham trashing me for cutting and running Afghanistan for the rest of my presidency, or I'll take the risk of escalating the war and just bet that the progressives will forgive me and not care. Iraq was the one they were so upset about. Afghanistan has this like veneer of legitimacy because bin Laden was there on September 11th and whatever kind of thing. And so they'll just look away. And that was a correct calculation. He calculated that right. But now if you look at like organized left-wing, anti-war movements, groups like the Answer Coalition, which is based on the Communist Party USA, and Code Pink, which is Medea Benjamin and them, I think they're sincere. It's just, in fact, Medea Benjamin and the Code Pink people, they've stayed hardcore anti-war this whole time.
No, they did, and I actually, even though I'm Catholic and for life, I actually adore them.
Yeah, I mean, they're very sincere. It's just what you're noticing is that all of their supporters went home when Barack
Mm-mm-mm.
Obama got elected. The core group stayed code pink and stayed anti-war and trashed Obama's, people the same way that they trashed Bush's and did everything they could to oppose the wars. But overall, it's just like in the 1990s, conservatives were anti-government. They weren't just anti-Bill Clinton until 1998 when Bill Clinton cheated on his wife and the promise of George Bush's son on the horizon was coming. And then they decided that actually they love government. In fact, they love government more than any Maoist ever loved government. And they'll support torturing people to death. They'll support any aggressive war. They'll support telling any lie, killing any child, as long as their dear, dear, wonderful greatest leader since Winston Churchill ever, George W. Bush, says so. Each and every one of them would have, well, I won't go that far. They turn on their neighbors. They turn on their own family. They turn on anyone who knew better than them because they worship George W. Bush like he was Jesus. And because that's what suckers they were. They were
Suckers.
Obama bots for W. Bush. And then now it's the same thing under Donald Trump. You can be as anti-government as you want under Obama and Biden. But when Donald Trump is the president, then we need those pigs to crack those skulls because now it's for my issue instead of the
And it's
other
the same
one.
officers. I'll roll this grenade into your tent now.
All right.
I'm looking at what's happening in Minneapolis, and I'll tell you my take first, and then maybe we'll get yours. This police officer, this ICE agent that shot this woman in the face. I looked at the video from every angle, and I feel it's a tragic. And I actually posted this on social media and got torn apart by those who love state violence, I guess. But I even said, I think it was a tragic mistake. And I think he was afraid. He maybe should have been back on the street.
A tragic mistake. How
No,
dare you?
no, I said I'm not going to judge this officer, nor this woman. I think it's a tragedy. But what's reprehensible is the way the right, I mean, some on the right, loudmouths on the right and on social media, are mocking this woman, celebrating her death, posting FAFO. Then you had an ICE officer just days later say to protesters, "Didn't you learn your lesson?" It's threatening to kill them. And then I see, all of these people on the right, many who I've admired, just being very cavalier about this violence. Or as we used to say when I was a young conservative during the Clinton years, Bill Clinton and his jackbooted thugs.
Right.
But if it's our jackbooted, it's the same jackboots, it's the same guys. Um, it's I see this as the Zionification of our country, just this
Yeah.
acceptance with brutality and violence. Do you think those who have been apologizing for the war in Gaza are being influenced to support more radical violence from the state against dissent
Yeah.
at home?
Yes. I mean, overall, people do, especially government school victims, but pretty much everybody, TV victims as well, kind of view the law as the arbiter of right and wrong, right? It's the old saw. If you think of like someone saying, well, it's wrong to smoke marijuana. Why? Because it's against the law. Why? Because it's wrong. That kind of thing. Um, And so, but then the flip side of that is if George H.W. Bush says we can all go and indulge our bloodlust and drop a bunch of bombs on Baghdad, then cool, fun, kinetic excitement and explosions. And I speak for myself because I was 15 in Iraq War I. And what H.W. Bush was doing there as the supreme authority in the country was saying that this is moral. This behavior that is obviously on the face of it, completely psychopathic behavior is not just acceptable, but this is what it means to love your country and to be a patriot and even to serve God and Jesus and everything is to engage in this thing. So it's a license really to engage in bloodlust that people accept it. And so government does become the arbiter of what's right and wrong. It just depends if your guy's in office or not. Or like in the case of Trump the first time, it was like the government versus him. So a lot of liberals still identified with the government because it was acting kind of like antibodies trying to keep Trump out with their Russiagate hoax. And like even during COVID, it was the Democratic governors that locked down more than Trump did. So it was the regime overall the people were siding with rather than dear leader. They're siding with the regime to spite him, basically, or to spite him. But overall, uh, in the W. Bush years, I got this a lot more during W. Bush. I got this some during first Trump, less so. I don't think I've really seen this during second Trump, but I definitely got this a lot during W. Bush. Never during Obama and Biden for some reason.
No.
And that is Romans 13. Romans 13 says, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. And that means that when Republicans are in power, you better do what they say, boy. And you better pay your taxes, and you better kiss those jack boots, and you better go to war if they say so, and you better support torture under the ticking time bomb scenario if that's what your dear, dear leader demands of you. Because Romans 13 says that God says you must do what the state says, right? And so that's the kind of thinking that'll immediately take over the mind of a Republican or a Democrat when their guy is in power. So for me, when a Republican is in power and then Republicans are good on anything despite that fact anyway, I celebrate that. And the same thing with like any good anti-war leftists in the age of Obama, take a Glenn Greenwald, and there are a lot of good journalists especially who stayed really good on this stuff. Who may have even voted for Obama because of who all his opponents were, but still were determined to be good journalists and hold the national security state to account and all of that. So you got to take them as they come. And I, as a libertarian, we're always a very small percentage of the population, politically speaking and all that. And I have found that our movement tends to gain new followers after an election, in the months after an election, when people get all caught up in all the promises, and then after the first year or so realize, hey, what happened to all the promises? And then they come to understand that it's, things are not exactly as they had been told. We see a lot of this of people who are disappointed in Obama, who really believed Obama would be anti-war, and then it turned out he just wasn't. Or people who thought that Donald Trump was going to make housing affordable for young people, and then found out that he explicitly wants to keep housing artificially expensive in order to bolster the bank accounts of the baby boomers at the expense of young people trying to start families. Ask him, he'll tell you in plain English. Yeah, but if we expand the supply of housing, well, a lot of old people have their equity in their house, and that would cost them their retirement. And so, to finish his thought, screw you, young people. You're just going to have to live in an apartment with a roommate instead of getting married and having a spouse and a family and a house. So later's for you, because that's who votes, is old people, not young people, those kinds of things. So
Yeah, I want to ask you about young people. When I was young, I'm a little older than you. When we were young, I was a young libertarian. I was a member of the Libertarian Party. I founded the Ayn Rand Society at my university in Hawaii. And I consider myself a conservative now, but it was cool to be a libertarian. Everyone across the political spectrum in like the 80s and 90s, if you said you were a libertarian, they'd go, oh, at least you're not a liberal, or oh, you're not a conservative. It was cool. But now it seems as we're moving into this post-liberal order, young people are losing the natural attraction that I would expect all young people to naturally be libertarian. It would just seem to
yeah.
me as a young person. But we see a lot of young people being attracted to the illiberal left or the illiberal right, which I think is going to have a catastrophic um, results. But I understand their sentiment because they're seeing the rhetoric of the free market or liberalism being used to rob them of everything, whether it's the ability to date like a normal human being, to be free from being barraged by pornography in the fourth grade, to have careers, to buy homes. So we're seeing young people abandon libertarianism, the big, liberalism properly understood,
Mhm.
for illiberal ideologies. What's the antidote to that?
Well, yeah, first of all, what's part of what's happening is Donald Trump is sucking up a lot of that anti-government sentiment and that anti-establishment sentiment, because he's not a Bush, right? He is at least something of a rogue from the outside, although, his policies notwithstanding, but his political character, he came in from the outside swinging and knocked a Bush and a Clinton out in order to even get in there in the first place. And all of that. And obviously the government worked very hard to keep him out, and they were unable to keep him out. So if you're just young and lean right and anti-establishment and anti-government, here's your guy. He's in the ring and he's actually in the chair. He's the president of the United States right now. So, there's the leader of that. Now you want to be a stickler and complain about, what he's actually doing and how far short of his promises he's falling and all of that. Well, that's where people will find libertarianism more and more over the next few years. They're like, well, you guys were the ones who actually stayed consistent this whole time. And we're the ones who, correctly analyze what was happening and what was likely to happen and that kind of thing. And so the same thing will happen with him as always happens when the parties switch in power in that sense. But overall, it's correct, right? That on the right side, they already abandoned the center. They already abandoned W. Bush, Jeb Bush, John McCain style conservatism. Donald Trump and most of his people, they don't call themselves conservatives. They're MAGA or they're just nationalists or whatever they are, but they're not trying to allow Conservatism Inc. to define their politics for them. They consider themselves to the right, at least, or to the more populist from the country club Republicans. That change has already been made. We talked about Obama. He was just a facsimile of Hillary Clinton, just with a different kind of, marketing campaign behind him. It was not like he was Dennis Kucinich or Ron Paul or, well, Ron is a Republican, but not like he was Dennis Kucinich, who's, actually a rogue on that side. And so they still are very much stuck with very, very conventional center-left candidates as far as that goes. Well, at least for the presidency so far. But then you're absolutely right that as a result of the absolutely bankrupt stewardship of the Bushes, the Clintons, McCain, Biden, and their whole group since the end of the Cold War and at the end of the 1980s, so many people have just, because of their wars and because of the repeated economic crises, they've just completely lost faith in the system. And the system meaning the expression of which is these so-called moderates, who in fact are extremists, but the centrists, the compromisers between the left and the right. And instead, people have moved further and further to the left and the right. And I always have to stop and try to remember to stop and blame W. Bush again here, because for lying us into the Iraq War. And on top of that, getting caught, torturing people, and then demanding that the entire right half of the American public support him in that torture so he didn't have to go to prison for the rest of his life for it. And that they went along with all of that. And because he lied and tried so hard and did convince his base that Saddam did attack us on September 11th, then the right-wing base during the Bush years, they thought that everyone who knew better than them was the worst traitor to America. How could you oppose hitting Iraq when Iraq did September 11th? You commie, pinko, homo traitor. No, seriously, they hated us. They hated us because they thought that we hated America. And I mean me, I'm a libertarian, but and all the liberals too. They thought really that people who opposed the Iraq War opposed defending the United States from a nation state that had aggressively attacked us out of the blue. And their resentment against the traitorous liberal,
and they have weapons of mass destruction, don't you know?
Yes, and well, even that was besides the point. It was the ties to Al Qaeda. I mean, it was like 75% of people believed at the time of the war that Saddam had done the attack, and that means essentially everyone on the right believed that. Okay, other than the American Conservative Magazine and antiwar.com, but I mean, the broad American right had been made to believe that Saddam had done the attack. So put yourself in their shoes. Now, your sister, your brother, your next door neighbor doesn't support doing anything about that. people were really pissed off. People broke up their families over this. And of course, for everyone who actually knew better, it was like, no, you idiots.
Oh, and the
The
National
reason
Review
we're against
magazine,
this is
I'm
because
sure.
Saddam didn't do it. And so the hard feelings of the modern partisan split and the modern absolute hatred between the partisan sides in America, I trace back to Iraq War II. It was not that bad during the Bill
No,
Clinton years, where the people hate each other that much. It was George W.
I was
Bush
in D.C. in those
demanded
years.
that the right be as horrible as him and as horrible to their own families and friends as he was to the poor people of Iraq, just to protect himself. And that was a huge part of what has corrupted this country. And then I'll do you one more. Obama comes in as the pendulum swing, ostensibly to Bush, and he's the first black president. And he's not a Republican, he's a Democrat. So every Republican took a step back on race. And then also, this was just in the absolute aftermath, the direct aftermath of the crash of 2008 and the Great Recession, when all the bankers got bailed out, where the government printed endless amounts of money to save everybody who was already rich and screwed over everybody who wasn't. And so then at the dawn of the Great Tea Party movement on the right and the Occupy movement on the left, what did they do? They started shoveling all of this S about white privilege and racism and sexuality, trans this and that, and all of this stuff that they just totally shoved down everyone's throat by escalating the culture war by 1,000%, just to distract from what was happening in Washington and New York City. It's the most obvious thing in the world that they just push this from the top down, ESG and DEI and all this. Who is behind it? Wall Street, literally, BlackRock,
Literally.
that has this huge controlling interest, in every other corporation. Force them all to do this. Force them all to force this culture war back down the throat of the American people. Your problem isn't a bunch of bankers in New York and a bunch of warmongers in Fort Worth and Boeing collecting welfare checks, producing planes that don't fly. No, your problem is your next door neighbor who's got a little bit of different pigment than you. Don't you know he
Yeah.
has a special privilege that you don't have, and all of this crap, which was all just a psyop. Just one more, too, as long as I'm rambling here, and I'm right, damn it. Look at Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter was just a psyop to protect the police. The question was about police brutality and police shooting people in the back, shooting white people and black people and Mexicans for reaching for their waistband. Oh, he was reaching for his waistband. I thought maybe he had a gun. Not obviously. He was just trying to pull up his pants. They're all wearing low sagging pants. You know he was just trying to pull up his pants, and you murdered him anyway. And instead of doing accountability for killer cops, they changed it to white people versus black people. And the white people have been using the police forces to hunt down and kill all the black people. And so you know what we're going to do? We're going to create this giant new anti-racism movement. And once we abolish racism from the corrupt hearts of white people, then police brutality will stop. You know, instead of actually just holding police officers accountable for breaking the law.
White people were shot at a higher percentage than black people.
Well, I don't know higher percentage, but even if not, the point is, as soon as they renamed it Black Lives Matter, they renamed it, "This is not your problem, everyone who's not black." And then they told black people, what's happening here is everyone who's not black is killing you by way of the deputy sheriff's department, which is just completely not at all the nature of what was happening at all. The fact of the matter is, poor people are low-hanging fruit for police brutality, okay?
Yeah,
that's what it is. And blacks, as Norm Macdonald would point out, tend to be poorer. That's the correlation you're looking for. There are very few cops who join the forces to beat up black people. They do join up because they like to fight. And black people are a lot of who they fight. but they'll blow away a Mexican security guard working on the night shift at the auto dealership too. They'll blow away a white guy who's got a 22 for shooting birds at the airport who left it in his hotel room back there, and they still shoot him, Daniel Shaver, on the floor, right? So in other words, what I'm arguing is that all this culture war, this political divide is just as George Carlin warned us back in Jamming in New York in 1992. They exploit all these differences between us and emphasize all these differences between us so that the rich can keep going to the bank. That's what it's all about. So they can get their bailout and we all get the shaft.
Scott, I want to direct this, and a lot of my audience were mostly conservatives, probably a lot of Catholics, a lot of Muslims too, though, and so a lot of your libertarian rhetoric is making folks cringe. But I want to even be more. I want them to cringe even more. What's happening now with Somalis in Minnesota or here in Texas?
I didn't even answer your question about the immigration stuff. Did you want me to get to that at all?
No. I want to get on this, just to this point about the racism to distract us. Here I live in Texas, and everyone that I know, all of my neighbors, friends from church, are just in a panic that Sharia law is coming for Texas. Texas is about to have Sharia law, and I'm getting stories in my feeds flooded with this. Now, I asked them, have you ever met a Muslim? Here in Texas, have you ever met a Muslim? No. Have you ever in your life been wronged by a Muslim? No. But somewhere here in Texas, they're organizing to impose Sharia law on us. Yes. And the story actually boils down to an imam went to liquor stores and convenience stores owned by men that prayed at his mosque. And he said, if you want to continue to pray at our mosque, and he brought 2 other men from the mosque, you cannot sell alcohol or pornography and pray at our mosque. They took that story to say he was imposing Sharia law on the people of Texas. No, he was telling, it'd be like a Catholic priest saying, you work at Planned Parenthood, I'm sorry, you cannot present yourself to communion. That's just our teaching. So they took that one story. And if I tell you, I have one neighbor, lovely lady, she's scared to death. Well, my assistant's Muslim, Scott. You met her. She's wonderful. But I spy on her. I listen. I'm trying to catch. I never once caught her conspiring to impose Sharia law on us yet. I don't know if she uses a code language or whatnot.
That's an Israeli psyop, man. I'm telling you, you just can't beat Max Blumenthal. Max Blumenthal and Eli Clifton, both 2 nice young Jewish boys who will set you straight on exactly what's going on here. Rabbi Yarushami from Brooklyn, nowhere near San Marcos, Texas, is behind all this. And what it is a giant push to pass state laws, and this goes back 10 years, to pass state laws to protect the various states from being taken over by Sharia law. When, in fact, there's no threat of Sharia law on any horizon anywhere at all. The entire purpose of the thing is to make it seem like there's a threat worth defending from. And that's where people get this idea. Oh my God, there's a threat of Sharia law. Otherwise, why is the state legislature debating this law about how to protect us from the rise of Sharia law and all this? And the only other kernel of truth I've ever heard to this, and it's a very limited cases because apparently it just doesn't come up that often or whatever, is the only place where Sharia has ever been applicable in court is no different than for Catholics and Jews who have their own special religious rights concerning divorce and family law. Now, none of these are allowed to override protections in state law. But if Catholic churches or Jewish synagogues have certain procedures for how families are split apart or how to do so within the religious framework, then the courts respect that. Not impose that then on other people who don't even believe in Islam or Judaism or Catholicism. Just in this case, Your Honor, we're getting divorced, but for me to get divorced from her, according to my priest, we have to do it this way. And then the judge says, yes, of course, we'll do it that way. Right? But there's in no way, this doesn't, for example, mean that, well, Your Honor, state law says that she can divorce me, but my priest says she can't. So you don't let her. because my Catholic law or my Sharia law says that you have to tell her she's my slave and can't leave. No, nothing like that. Nothing that would be overturning any protection in the civil code
I hope my wife
whatsoever.
doesn't see this show because I told her that she's my slave and she can't leave. But
They do. We've
honey,
had
don't
that
listen to Scott.
conversation
He's
around
not
here a couple
Catholic. He
times.
doesn't know
But
what he's talking about. But
yeah.
well, no, and you see them. They're saying like the Somali fraud cases. In 2010, 135 rabbis and Jewish elected officials and government officials in the East Coast got wrapped up in the largest, I think, organ trafficking
Oh yeah,
uh,
I remember that.
scheme in American history. But I
I
never
know.
once saw it reported in the press as Jewish organ harvesting schemes, or, where I grew up in Chicago Heights, in the early late 80s, early 90s, an FBI operation took down the mafia in my neighborhood. A lot of my friends and their fathers went to prison. I never saw it like it was never said as, the Italian, it was what it was, but it's not in like the headlines.
Yeah.
But here we are right on time, just like we were told to worry. I work in Nigeria, by the way. I work in Iran. Can't even talk about what we do in Iran for the safety of who we serve in Iran. I know very well. I just made a movie in Iran. I know very well what's going on in Iran. I work in Nigeria. I've worked in Nigeria for years. We not only do we provide security for vulnerable Christian communities, but the Jewish community in Nigeria. So a couple of weeks ago, on a dime, Bill Maher and Laura Loomer and all of a sudden we're like, oh my gosh, they're killing Christians in Nigeria. And Bishop Barron, oh my gosh, they've been killing Christians in Nigeria for quite a long time. I said to my staff, this is just a distraction from Gaza, but let's take advantage of this little influence operation and start promoting our work and advertising our work on Nigeria so we can expand the churches we secure. So we were able to do that, and we took advantage of it. That lasted like literally, Scott, 2 weeks, right? No
Yeah.
one's talking about Nigeria now. Then it was Venezuela. We're bringing democracy to Venezuela. It's amazing. And now it's Iran. We forgot Nigeria's not, I guess Nigeria is a utopia now. That's done. Move along. Now it's Iran. And I want to maybe close with this Iran because this is a big, big, big deal. Again, it's just like Iraq. Everyone, they tried to I'm sure you were mentioned, like the National Review article that had a list of people that should be excommunicated from the right. I was chairman of the College
I
of
was too young. I was too young. They put Justin in there, Justin
That's
Raimondo, my
right.
boss,
And
the anti-war
Justin
company.
was a hero of mine, and I was chairman of the Young Republicans at the time, and I opposed the invasion and, was called every name in the book. By the way, I'd been a veteran and infantryman. And I said at the time, I'm going to oppose this war, and my sons will end up fighting in it. And my oldest son ended up fighting in Iraq and Syria. Can you imagine? He fought in
Yeah.
Iraq and Syria 12 years later. And yet none of them, you can't find anyone in their family tree that's ever served. But here they are. Then they repented. All these hawks repented for supporting the Iraq war, right? I think David Brooks, David Frum, then they all say, oops,
Most of them. Yeah.
oops. Now, but they're right back again saying this time, this is important. Someone that I respected just posted on social media today. They say we don't care about Muslim lives. We don't. We don't care about the lives of the people of Iran. This is about Israel and us. Right. So can you walk, if anyone is listening that really is buying I think that if they're listening to this show, they really just want the people of Iran to be free from the oppressive mullahs. And I can tell you they're bad. A lot of Afghans had evacuated who are Shia, evacuated to Iran, where they suffer brutal persecution. They've passed laws that you can't even sell bread to Hazara, for example.
Right.
We had forced conscription. My organization had to, I guess I can talk about this now, 2 years ago. They were forcibly conscripting Afghans with American training to go fight in Russia for Russia, and they were trying to get them to Gaza. We were able to break up those movements by evacuating the core leadership from Iran. But there are people who are good people, like a lot of those good people that were like, let's help the people of Afghanistan. Well, no, this is about helping the people of Iraq. Can you tell us why this in no way offers any hope for the people of Iran?
Well, look, no need to be so stark about it. Miracles have happened before, I guess. There's every reason to be skeptical of it. First of all, there's every reason to be skeptical of the motive of these people. And these are all the worst war hawks who, clearly have supported war with Iran all along. And after Gaza, these are the biggest cheerleaders of what Israel has just done in Gaza. So if you look at Twitter and you see Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham and Ben Shapiro and Laura Loomer saying, we stand with the liberty of the people of Iran, I mean, it's just completely laughable. We could see right through them and see what their agenda is. And what are they saying? They care so much about the people of Iran that, dang it, we owe it to them to go to war against them, destroy a significant part of their country, kill significant numbers of their people, overthrow their government that they have not seen fit to overthrow this whole time or even try to unelect in any major way. And in doing so, that's what's going to save all their lives and set them all free and make them all so much better off. Like, even on the face of it, it's completely contradictory. Now, you could
And
see
they
how
say
they
how
might.
great this is, right? And they say how great this is, and they go, there's been 12,000 people killed, but they say it with like a glee, so we need to go to war. Like, wait a second, you're celebrating something that you are admitting yourself has led to 12,000 deaths.
And which is completely preposterous, by the
There's
way.
no evidence to this. Like,
Absolutely
they
false
never
and
once say,
stupid
look,
lies. Yeah,
right? And no civilians have died in Gaza, but they've discovered 12,000 have been killed in Iran, maybe.
yeah.
And like when you rightfully and courageously said, and I said this in Kyiv 2 years ago, I went and spoke to their government in Kyiv, and I said, guys, you were invaded brutally from the east, and you've been invaded in a much more sophisticated and nuanced way from the west. And you will be our sock puppet, and we will fight to the last dead Ukrainian boy for our interests, not yours. And we brought this war upon you through Maidan and are ever encroaching to the east. And you've been very clear on this. So what's the fruit of Maidan? What is it? At least 500,000 casualties in Ukraine right
Absolutely.
now?
Yeah.
So that's
Minimum.
the fruit
Bare
of
minimum.
that 2014 action. So
Yeah.
what will the fruit be of this mischief in Iran right now for the Iranian people?
Well, look, so if America were to, for example, try to target the Ayatollah and all of the top ruling council of mullahs and all of that and kill them, then most likely they just find the next highest ranking Shiite cleric and make him the Ayatollah. That would not be a real regime change. And I don't believe for a minute that there are enough monarchists that Israel can possibly infiltrate into that country, or CIA can infiltrate into that country to actually succeed in overthrowing the regime there. It clearly has a lot of popular support, if not, unanimous consent, but no state does. But for all the hype about how this protest movement was meant to overthrow the regime, or even how the armed squads of rioters and hit teams were running around, that they were able to somehow or were even near the ability to overthrow the regime, that the regime was going to crumble in the face of their attack or their move or whatever, is completely laughable, right? That's completely broken. That there were some huge rallies that weren't even necessarily demands for the regime to fall, as much as just anti-inflation protests and this kind of thing. And then, the violent raids began. And then over the weekend, they had giant pro-government rallies because guess what? There's a huge conservative right in Iran
Well,
that
guess what?
supports
You
the
have
regime there.
Pompeo posting on X, the Mossad is behind this.
Yeah,
I mean, and then they talk about propaganda. The regime can just take that Pompeo post. I heard some
sure. And
pro-war neocon
even without that,
influencer.
yeah, I mean, you can. If you look at like the big protest movement of 2009 in the Green Revolution, after, supposedly Ahmadinejad stole the election from Mousavi, and then the protest was for Mousavi, but who's he? He was one of the Ayatollah's guys too. He was part of the original revolution, and he's a conservative cleric, and, right in line with the rest of the Iranian presidents that we've had since, at least Khatami. And so was he like some kind of hardcore pro-American type? No. He was just maybe a little bit more conciliatory than Ahmadinejad, who is more of a right winger and a firebrand. But remember when George Bush, in July of 2005, George Bush directly lectured the people of Iran and said, "Don't you elect the right winger." And they all turned out and voted for Ahmadinejad the next day by the millions. So yeah, what do you think is going to happen? And it's clearly just their imagination that somehow the monarchists have the popular consent of the people of that country to take it over. Or
Again, I think this
this
is a
is one
poison pill.
that goes a lot, claimed a lot, is that if only the Ayatollah was gone and the regime was changed, then peace would break out, harmony would break out.
Magic.
The new regime would be friends with the West and everything would be fine. When in fact, there are major potential armed factions, including some of those who've been fighting on the ground, the whole place could devolve into civil war and could look like Syria did 15 years ago or 20 years ago.
Which I was going to say a joke, but you just ruined my punchline. I was going to say,
Oh,
well,
sorry.
how can you say that when that's what happened in Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and Libya, right? We
Yeah.
changed regimes and they became like wonderful places to
Yeah,
be.
and Afghanistan too.
Afghanistan's wonderful as well. No, and again, I think this whole thrusting the monarchy, they don't think they're going to thrust the monarchy on the people
How
of
could they?
Iran. They know that this is not a popular play. Again, I think it's a poison pill.
You know what?
It,
Let me ask you this, though. So here's what they did in Venezuela. They didn't do a regime change. They just did a president change. And they told the vice president, "You're going to fall in line, lady, or you're going to find out the hard way." And she said, "Okay, fine." So I worry that they might think that they could try that same kind of scam in Iran. Kill the Ayatollah, wait till the new guy gets appointed, and then tell him, "Look, you don't want us to kill you too. Go ahead and give in on the following 10 points or whatever and see and try it." I'm not recommending it. I'm saying this is my fear, is that they're now going to be so full of confidence in the aftermath of Venezuela that they think that they could get away with trying something like that, which I think would be very much less likely to work in Iran
what a
than in
catastrophe
Venezuela.
for Trump. I mean, Iran is not Iraq or Afghanistan.
Yeah.
It's
Or
much
or
more,
Venezuela.
or
Yeah.
Venezuela. No, it's a big country. It's a diverse and challenging country, and it would be that's why it was part of their plan from day one to topple the regime in Iran. But it's just a bridge too far, and what a catastrophe. The MAGA movement, in my mind, it's an anti. At its heart, we were attracted to Trump primarily because we saw he was anti-war. I remember
Right.
in 2016 when he was first nominated, I went to Milo's big gay party at the convention because one of my donors, who's a Chinese Presbyterian, his wife loved Milo at the time and said, "Can you take me to meet him?" So I'd asked Steve Bannon if he could get us tickets to this Milo thing. It was real dud. It was not fun at all, but it was weird. But I went with my donors and I saw Steve there. And at the time, Steve was like, "Are you going to join the team?" And I was no, because I was still not a Trump guy. I was even more embarrassingly, I was a national co-chair for Cruz for President at the time.
Ha!
And I was just really angry. And I had said to Steve, I go, he's not a conservative. Trump is not a conservative. And Steve said he's not. No, he's not. He doesn't say he's a conservative. I've never told you he's a conservative. And I said, I think he's a racist, and I don't like that thing he did with the disabled reporter. And I just went through my litany of things. And Steve said he's not a racist. He goes, listen, this guy is a nationalist. He just wants to fight for disenfranchised Americans so they can all have access to the American dream. And he hates wars. So you should love this guy because he really thinks wars are stupid and they're bad for business and da 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 da. And so I didn't buy it at the time, but as the first administration unfolded, I could feel the struggle within the administration and some of my friends that there was this real anti-war impulse. But it just seems like in the first year of his second term, what's happened to that anti-war impulse, it seems like every day it's a fight. Every single day, we don't know which way this ball is going to bounce. Lindsey Graham doesn't know how this ball is going to bounce, and Ron Paul doesn't know how this ball is going to bounce. It's a real tug of war.
Yeah, I mean, yesterday Trump said, "Geez, it looks like they stopped killing people and they promised not to execute anyone." And then so everyone on every news channel was asking, does he mean he's not going to bomb him then? Is that what he's saying? You know what I mean? It's just nobody really knows.
And then he said, to your earlier point, yeah, people got shot, but they weren't innocent people. They were running around shooting people.
Oh, did he say that?
Trump said that. He goes, yeah, the people
Wow.
that got shot were not like,
I can't keep track. I just,
no,
God,
it's
I
like,
can't.
I say that all of us can find things that Trump says and we can cling to that. We can hold to that. You know, even
Hey,
in
bring it
immigration,
up later. Yeah.
when he said, look, I'm for securing the border and a simple to use verification system. He's like, and I love immigrants. I want a lot of immigrants. I want them all here legally. And then you can see some of the rhetoric coming from his administration now, and you're like, well, it doesn't sound like that anymore. Um, but we
Yeah.
can all
And,
take something he said. I can piece together quotes from Trump and make it seem like he is my
oh,
perfect
sure.
president.
Or on anything. Yeah. He's on all sides of every issue. But, like to your earlier point about in his first term, he did make a deal to get us out of Afghanistan. And told Kabul, "Screw you guys, you're not part of this," and did the deal without them, with the Taliban, and somehow, I don't know under what black magic, got Khalilzad to agree to actually see that through and accomplish that, which is amazing. He tried repeatedly to get us out of Syria 3 times and was overruled by the Pentagon and backed down to them all 3 times, and he bears responsibility for that, not them. But, there was something to that. He complained about being in Somalia, said, "I don't wanna be in Somalia." Right? Um, he wanted to like win the ISIS war real quick, and then that was it. And now, so he
And I
did,
can
by
tell
the
you
way.
inside information. I was arguing to people on his team that you can't leave till you finish ISIS. We created ISIS. It's, we broke it, we bought it, finish ISIS before you leave. There was
Well,
a
that
real
was over by the end of 2017. That was
yeah,
over
but
by the end of his first year. So
yeah. No, and he did it. But I will
but
say
they,
there was a real impulse. I went there between him and being elected and being inaugurated. And I went there and documented the genocide of the Yazidis and the Christians, made a little documentary and gave it to Steve Bannon and said, sharing this for the president.
Mhm.
And but I can tell you there was a real impulse at the time. He just was like ready to go. Like, just let's go. Let's get out of Iraq now. So he
Yeah.
does have that real, that anti-war impulse.
But
And
that's the thing is, though, he bombed the crap out of Afghanistan for 4 years while he was negotiating that deal and didn't give a damn. He wanted out of Somalia. He bombed Somalia for 4 years straight. And since being inaugurated the second time, he's bombed them like 120 something times in the last year. He's been, he's severely increased the drone war in Somalia over where it was even at the height of Obama's war there. And he also inherited Obama's war in Yemen, helping Saudi and UAE and Al Qaeda fight the Houthis there. He kept that going for 4 years straight, killed a couple of 100,000 people, and didn't give a damn to kill a couple of 100,000 people. And
yeah,
then
2
was
million
perfectly
Arab
willing to go
civilians.
along with Israel on everything that they did, including shooting all those people in the knees at the Great March of Return, including the ridiculous Abraham Accords that caused October the 7th, including recognizing Israel's seizure of the Golan Heights and moving the embassy to Jerusalem, which is a giant kick in the face to the Palestinians, saying that all of Jerusalem belongs to the Israelis, including the entire eastern half as the eternal undivided capital of Israel and all
Which
that.
today in Eastern Jerusalem, today, I got videos sent to me. We have a new website. It's savewestbankchristians.org. We just launched. I think it's up now. And we'll be putting up all of the crimes in East Jerusalem and the West Bank. We're getting a lot of videos sent to us. And just today in East Jerusalem, again, they closed the schools. They're raiding businesses, beating up women every day.
Yep. So Trump, this is why I've rooted for Trump 3 times. I could never vote for the guy because he's just way too flawed, especially on Israel stuff. And on the wars, you could see how, okay, why is Trump good on Afghanistan? Because you don't really have to know anything to know that that's a waste of money, dude. You're not going to tame those wild men, whoever they are out there. We should just not do that. Remake Afghanistan into a modern Westphalian nation state and whatever. How many years are we supposed to spend doing this? How much money are we supposed to spend on this project? And so, on the just on the most basic level, it is such bad business to just piss endless fortunes away trying to tame the wild men of Afghanistan. But on these other things, well, Iraq might have been worth it if we'd stolen all the oil. And Syria, helping Al Qaeda there ain't that bad if it takes care of Israel's Shiite friends that Israel hates
Meanwhile,
more,
they're
right?
marching on Christian villages right now.
Yeah, but see, he
Right
doesn't care
now.
about that. Yeah, he
Right
doesn't care
now.
about that. He doesn't care about
Kurds
that.
and Christians are being murdered right now by the artist. I call him the
By the bin
artist
Ladenites, yeah.
formerly known as Jelani.
Yep,
They like to rebrand after him after they commit genocide and are members of ISIS.
yep.
Um, no, it
Fighting
is
the
it is
Kurds in
quite
Aleppo right now.
disheartening. Pardon?
Fighting the Kurds in Aleppo. The American-backed bin Ladenites are fighting the American-backed Kurds for the outskirts of Aleppo this morning.
Here we are.
Yeah. Um,
No, and
so
it's heartbreaking.
yeah.
And what hope do we have of going forward? We have an election coming up. I thought the Trump cabinet would descend into screw tape letters faster than it has. Sort of a war of all against all. I
Yeah.
I didn't know who would be first to go. I thought if Trump leaned neocon, Tulsi would jump. If he leaned towards the anti-war, Rubio would jump. But I think one of the two of them is going to be the first to jump, and then it's going to be a fist fight.
Well, I don't know. I think she has shown a willingness to go along with this stuff for whatever she is getting out of it. I don't know. I know that you know her. I wish you'd send her an email like this. I think the only role that she should be fulfilling in this world at all right now is working with Joe Kent to keep bin Ladenites off of these shores. I don't give a damn about Hezbollah, dude. I ain't afraid of Hezbollah. And I ain't afraid of well, an Al Shabaab sympathizer in this country could be a problem. Lone wolves or actual ass bin Ladenites. That is the terrorist threat to this country. And I think it's growing. And I think, it's all this kind of truther stuff
Well,
that
let
says
me let me
that
let me
bin Ladenites don't exist except when the CIA and the Israelis use them as puppets to do whatever their dirty work is, I think is not true. I think that, yes, they have always, taken great pleasure in using the bin Ladenites to kill Russians, to kill Serbs, to kill Russians again, to kill Shiites, fine. But then we are left vulnerable to radicalization by or terrorist attacks by men who are either directly part of these groups or recruited by them.
and
And
to your point earlier about 9/11 was the fruit of an earlier catastrophic attack that killed
yeah,
less than 200 civilians. Praise God, pray God, it won't be proportionate, whatever is the result of this. So
right,
keeping violent Islamists off our shore is something that is extremely important.
yeah.
As
And
someone
I
who,
wouldn't hold it against her for staying part of an administration that does a lot of terrible
and,
things. If that is her only job,
and
if
I can
that's what
tell
she is
you,
truly focusing on, then do it, dude.
and I
That's the
can,
job.
and I can tell you, and not from any conversations I've had with her since she's been sworn in as the director of national intelligence, just I can tell you this, that one of the startlingly, she's got her very strong anti-war convictions, but they come from this idea of opposing reckless, stupid wars is what's best for our national security. And this has always been her
Yeah,
concern. And she knows it is striking when you hear her begin to discuss, as we saw in her confirmation hearings. She was running circles around everyone that was trying to grill
right.
her. She knows these Islamist organizations inside and out. She's not naive. And I think people think that guys like you, Scott, and the guys like me were naive at the threat of political Islam. And I'm not naive. I lost an employee this year
And look, you
in
can see over
Nigeria.
my shoulder here, in that book, Enough Already, I say, look, just because there's a bin Ladenite threat, I am not saying our government should go and do something about it for us. This book is about how if we give them the writ to do that, we say, Bush, kill bin Laden and his 400 closest friends. And what does Bush do? He turns the world upside down. So our government is just too irresponsible to be granted the writ to go and kill these people overseas anywhere. I'm not saying that. I'm saying keep these people off of
Off our
our
shores.
shores.
And we
That
can be, I don't know about you, but I am for more sophisticated methods of disrupting their networks and making it more challenging for them to operate and commit
well,
acts of
whatever.
violence and to
Yeah,
break
look,
up their funding. But
sure.
And look, I'm not naive. This year, I lost 3 contractors. I lost 1 security guard in Nigeria, murdered by an Islamist while he was protecting 3 seminarians from being kidnapped, and he had a young family. We lost 2 contractors in Gaza who died when our baby formula warehouse was bombed by the state of Israel. My organization, we are nose to nose in India with Hindu nationalists. And in China, we've had over 10 Catholic bishops disappeared by atheist communists. There are a lot of threats to our security, but the way they use is there are less than 200,000, I believe, militant fighting Islamist soldiers on earth.
Oh, sure. Way less.
Less than 200,000.
Way less.
It's
At the height of the Islamic State, there were 200,000.
Yeah, and there's 1 billion Muslims.
Yeah.
And
right.
we are witnessing 1 billion people being calumniated because of a very small movement. If a $26 trillion economy it's going to have a $1.5 trillion defense budget this year, something I saw, something crazy like this. I don't know what the
It's already 1.7. They pretend it's only 1, and they want to increase it to 1.5. So call it
Right.
2.3 or whatever,
So
2.2.
So you would think, and that's not, and then if you think of the size of our intelligence communities, agencies, you think we could handle 200,000 extremists in a more sophisticated way than, like you said, turning the world upside down or painting our friends, our families, our neighbors,
Right.
who are less than 1% of the American population that are Muslim as extremists and making them feel fear,
The
feel
war on
unwelcome.
terrorism, Jason, begins with stopping supporting bin Ladenite terrorists in Syria and in Yemen and in Ukraine.
But
the
Jelani's so
helping
handsome,
Nazis.
don't you know?
Do what now?
Jelani's so handsome.
Oh,
You
God.
remember President Trump?
He has a very
Like-
strong past. Very
He's like,
strong.
You're a strong, handsome man with a strong past. Goebbels had a strong past.
Yeah.
Hitler had a strong past. No, it's just crazy to me. I saw people cheering and telling me we need to celebrate Jelani, some of these neocon foundations a year ago in
Shapiro.
DC.
Ben
And
Shapiro said,
now-
hooray, Al Qaeda has taken over Syria. Hey, at least he hates Hezbollah, Israel's enemy.
Yeah. And now, though, they're like up in an uproar. Oh, no, Jelani's marching on the Kurds and the Christians. Whoa.
Yeah.
What did you think was going to happen?
I know.
Well, Scott, I know you got a lot of show. I can't believe that you made time for us today because you got to be the busiest guy. And this is your, like, if you were in retail, this is your Christmas season. Whenever there's a war breaking out, I
It
think
never ends.
I
I'm like
think your
Newman on
family's like,
Seinfeld.
oh, we had
I'm
dinner
like Newman
planned.
on Seinfeld dealing with the mail. It just keeps coming, Jerry. It just keeps coming.
Maybe the Libertarian Institute is behind all these wars because it just.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, no, it's all a false flag to keep me in business. I'm making like 60 grand a year at this point.
Your
It's great.
mansion. And you do have a boat.
Yeah, I sure do.
You
You can get one too for $1,000 on Craigslist if you.
Yeah,
pick and
well,
choose
I'm not
carefully.
saying how much it costs. I'm just saying it looks like one of those boats that we drone strike.
It does look a lot like that.
Yeah,
Yes. Try not to get me in too much more trouble here.
I think you might get drone, but this isn't. So what is everyone listening? What do we do? Like, we do live in a constitutional republic. I do feel culpable for the actions of our government.
Yeah.
And so what should we do?
Well, look, I'll turn it into an evil, cynical commercial for myself. Join up the Scott Horton Academy.
Yes.
And you will learn this stuff as good as I got it, and then you will be as effective as I am in going out there and whooping these guys. I mean, we just need more me's out there, right?
We
And
need
so
more
that's
Scott
it.
Horton. To my assistant, Ritha, go to Scott Horton Academy and sign us up as an organization. We're all going to start taking this. How many classes are there?
There's a class on the terror wars and the new Cold War with Russia by me.
Okay.
There's classes on all domestic stuff by the great Jim Bovard, COVID, Waco, TSA, Patriot Act, all that kind of stuff, NSA spying stuff. And then you got Bill Bupert on Trail of Tears, American Stalemate and Military Defeat since 1945, and Ramsey Baroud, the great Ramsey Baroud on the reality of the Israel-Palestine conflict. And we also have Adam Francisco. Oh, you'll love this one, Jason. Adam Francisco is a Lutheran scholar who was recruited by Tom Woods to teach the entire history of Christianity and Judaism since the advent of Christianity, and the role of Jews and Judaism in Christianity, and the role of Christian Zionism in support for the modern Israeli state. And so, in other words, debunking Christian Zionism severely from the most qualified expert scholar that you could possibly find. And then we're working on Grant F. Smith is going to have a course on the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Bob Murphy is going to do one on the Great Depression and the New Deal. CJ Kilmer is working on his about Woodrow Wilson and how he's the worst person who ever lived because he's the father of Hitler and Lenin and Stalin and Mao and George Bush and Truman, Harry Truman. Anyway, and so it's just great. It's just great. But the basic deal is me. You get my terror war course, you get my Cold War course, and you get
We're going to do your terror
up.
war course, and we're going to do the
Christian Zionism.
Christian Zionism course. You know,
Oh,
Christian
you're gonna love it.
Zionism. It's I'll take someone like Mike Huckabee. I know this guy. And I remember when I first met him in 2007, I was national grassroots director for Brownback for President. And when Sam dropped out and endorsed McCain, I quit the campaign and I gave my database to the Huckabee campaign that I built working for Brownback. And because I was so anti-McCain, because he was just, a war hawk and a chicken hawk. And I just really liked Huckabee. I kind of got to see him on the campaign trail a lot while on another campaign. And I kind of come to see this guy. I was an atheist till my late 20s, Catholic, kind of. I went from being a zealous convert to a bad Catholic in 25 years, didn't take long. And so I look at evangelicals kind of like, goofy. I just saw him as this very sincere, goofy Christian who, asks Jesus before he does anything. And so I thought when he was going to be ambassador and he started getting accurate intelligence briefings and was going around the West Bank and going to Gaza, not on sort of, these Potemkin village tours, that we would see Huckabee really realign his position on what the West Bank and Gaza, which we did not see. And then it made me really understand. I still think he's probably fundamentally a better human than me, which isn't hard, but he clings to an ideology that is vicious and brutal and thoughtless. And he has swallowed it hook, line, and sinker, so that you're challenging. I think there's a lot of Mike Huckabees that are just like our neighbors and our friends who are decent people, but like Hannah Arendt said with the banality of evil, the most vicious things are cliches. And they say cliche after cliche knit together that when you read it, these cliches, as they're knit together, they're advocating for genocide.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. I don't know how sincere the guy is, but I heard him say the other day, same as Ted Cruz. I learned it in Sunday school. Well, I'm sorry, dude, but Sunday school, you were a child and your teacher was your friend Jimmy's mom. And she's some stupid broad who doesn't know the first damned thing about the Bible. And neither do you. Why don't you ask somebody who actually cares? Instead of your friend Jimmy's mom, what do you think this Bible prophecy means? Jimmy's mom? Should I help Israel murder babies to help Jesus come back sooner? That's what I learned when I was 7 years old in Sunday school. Like, I'm sorry, dude. That's not religion. That is just utter stupidity. I have nothing but contempt for that. That's your sincere faith, some absolute idiot goddamn belief that some person, some just regular person from your neighborhood told you when you were 7.
The problem is that there are whole neighborhoods where everyone believes this. I will say in my neighborhood, my whole neighborhood now is red pilled. But on this issue, initially, like I'd invite people over, I'd be wearing my Free Palestine hat, and my neighbors, hey, aren't you the guy I see on Steve Bannon? What's up with that hat? Like they were really confused. Everyone's starting to wake up. praise God. It
Yeah.
took a
I
genocide.
shouldn't I let myself get upset. I just hate the inanity of that.
No,
You know
it's
what I mean?
insane. But these are the same people. They've never met a Muslim. Like I will ask them, "Have you ever met them?" They're like, "Oh, the Muslims are taking over," and I'm like, I mean, where?
Yeah, in San Antonio?
Where? And I'll say this,
I see nothing but Mexicans,
and
360 degrees
and
down
even
there,
my
man.
Muslim assistant, people think she's Mexican. They wouldn't even know. So, but it's no, it's just strange to me, the fear and the lack of empathy. Like, because I will tell
Yeah.
you this, I travel a lot for work. I was actually in Italy for one of our mutual friends' weddings, and I was in a small little village on the sea with my wife, and I see a young Syrian man begging. Now, why was a young Syrian man alone in a remote village? Is it because he's an invader? Uh, Seeking revenge for the Battle of Lepanto and he's wanting jihad and expansion? Or is it that we fomented the destruction of his country and he ran for his and swam and paddled for his life? So, how do you look at these people and see invaders? I see the wreckage of
Yeah. Well,
stupid
it's the
wars.
volume. I mean, it's the volume. And people don't understand that, when TV said, "Oh my God, look at all these Muslims coming." They didn't say, I mean, you honestly would have had to hear, my show to hear someone say, you notice that these refugees are from Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, and Yemen. And it would be Palestine, except they're captives and not allowed to travel. But otherwise, um, any of these countries sound familiar to you? Anything about them that you could think of might be why they want to flee? And then people say, "Oh yeah, but what about all the sub-Saharan Africans?" Okay, fine. They're economic refugee or economic migrants, but they're crossing what used to be the very closed southern border of the nation state of Libya that no longer exists because
Mm-mm.
of the United States of America, which took the side of literal bin Ladenite head choppers, suicide bombers just home from Iraq when they overthrew Gaddafi in
So
2011
you
and
just,
smashed that country into three warring pieces ever since.
you just, you probably didn't mean to do it. You just sold me. I support the war in Iran now because they're beautiful people. I love Iranians, and they
You're
have
just going to
great
bring them
food.
all to Europe so
They
they're
have great
closer and easier to
food.
get to.
So what you're saying is, if we get this war, we'll get all these beautiful people and their food. Ah,
I
just
guess
a couple
so.
million deaths,
That's the hard way.
a couple thousand American deaths, and
Yeah.
$1 trillion. But we
You
get it.
could just
I,
tweet
I
at
might get a
them and
new
ask them for a
restaurant.
recipe.
I might get a new restaurant. I don't know.
Um, you know, you could just pass recipes around on social media and
There's enough already. Yeah, I can just go to
save some
Beverly
money.
Hills. I was a
Yeah,
producer on a film called The Stoning of Soraya M. And it's stars Jim Caviezel and Sheree Ashlu. We actually won the NAACP Image Award, and we're runner up
huh,
at Toronto, and we won a lot of awards. It's in Farsi, actually, the whole film. And but because of that film, when the Green Revolution was happening with Mousavi, I was asked to speak at a lot of Iranian events, and so I spoke at this protest in Beverly Hills. Um, and it was an Iranian-led protest in Beverly Hills. It was the only protest I'd ever been to where half of the people showed up in Bentleys.
right.
It
Bunch of monarchists, right?
was a nice protest.
Couple of MEK cultists thrown in for good measure.
I get emails from those guys all the time
I used to, yeah.
inviting me to meetings. I don't know what they're about or what they're doing.
Oh, they're total kooks. They'll kidnap your children and hold them for ransom and force you into celibacy. And it's a nightmare cult.
Would
The
they
MEK.
kidnap my kids? Is because I have one that's about to go to a very expensive college. I don't want to be celibate, but if I didn't have to pay for my
There's a
son,
compromise there. It
I
sounds
don't
a little
know, like
tempting, huh?
it's like, wait, what? Oh no.
The
Again,
price of college these days. We need a free market, I'll tell you.
oh, it's I love my son. He's homeschooled. He's a good kid. I just didn't think he was gonna get into the school. And he
Yeah.
got accepted. I was like,
Well, good luck. I hope you
"Oh,
don't get a gay communist back when he's
oh,
done.
trust me? No, I'm more likely to get, a post-liberal alt-right." That's
Oh,
my
no, no.
boys are way to the right of me. They sit
Just
me
send him some
down.
Rothbard, man. Keep him on the straight and narrow.
Yeah, I just always bring it back to our Catholic faith.
There you go.
And that I always say I'm an anthropological integralist. And what I mean by that is that um all of my politics derive from my understanding of the truth of the human person as having an inviolable dignity, beauty, and worth. And so that is the source of my politics. But
It's a
yeah,
great
we
place to
we
start.
need pardon?
That's a great place to start.
Well, who led me there was the atheist Ayn Rand.
There you
So
go.
a lot of conservatives and libertarians like to bash Ayn Rand once they quote unquote progress past her. But I'm just really grateful that I'd read Kurt Vonnegut and Ayn Rand in middle school.
I
And
love Kurt Vonnegut. I never read Ayn Rand other than I read a collection of essays called Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. And she has an essay in there about the communism of the airwaves. That was really good. But I never read her novels because they're crap. But anyway, go on.
no. Anthem and We the Living are great.
Okay,
It's
maybe. I
actually,
just
as her
don't read
English
fiction, man.
got
I just
better,
don't read
I
fiction.
feel her fiction became worse.
Yeah.
But I was a weirdo. I founded the Ayn Rand Society at the University of Hawaii. I would walk around but I loved Herman Hesse. So I'd have like Narcissus and Goldman and The Virtue of Selfishness or The Capitalism of Ideal. They both went with me everywhere I went. And but like you, I never liked Atlas Shrugged. I thought it was just
I got like 100 pages into it. Not even. I bet I got 25 pages in that book and was just like, whatever. I don't care about this.
I'm in the movie.
Oh, really?
I play Andrew Breitbart, my daughter and I play the mayor's aides at Dagny Taggart's party.
That's funny.
Yeah, that was a
I'll have
good
to check that out on the
that was a
Pirate
good
Bay.
experience. Well, Scott, I'm
All
just
right.
grateful you came on today. There's so much you're such a source of information. Like I had all these notes I wanted to talk to you about more in depth on Venezuela, on Iran, on Gaza. We have a three-ring war circus going on.
Yeah.
It was hard to really dive in deep onto any of the issues, but I just want to thank the Libertarian
Cover some
Institute,
ground.
your podcast, antiwar.com, and all your supporters, because you really have held the line now for decades. Um, and I'm grateful for you. And maybe now we're going to see some real fruit of all this work and that this war might not happen in Iran.
I sure hope you're right about that. And, I won't take any credit. As Colonel McGregor says, time wins more arguments than reason. And I just think,
Oh,
well,
that's a good one.
enough time has passed now that's what's really, going on here. And if people recognize that those of us who cared and stood against this stuff all along actually had a point, then that's good too. But I would just say that, it can be very frustrating. Obviously, if you're not born of wealth and influence, it could be hard to figure out how you can make a difference. And then what's the point of even caring if you can't make a difference? But the truth is that overall we can. And when the public sentiment shifts, that eventually, ultimately, the people get the government that they demand, as Ron Paul teaches, even in the Soviet Union. When the people were finally sick and tired of it, the damn thing went away. And so it is ultimately up to us, even though without any magical theories of popular sovereignty, if the American people won't stand for it, then it cannot be. And that ultimately is the bottom line. And that goes for each and every person listening here, that we can all be a part of that in one way or another,
Yeah, and I don't know if you thought about this, but this is something that gives me comfort. I don't need to see success in anything I'm fighting for in my life. My hope is that we're planting seeds that shelter our posterity from violence, chaos, tyranny, and war.
Yeah.
And that's my real hope. And I always think to what Frodo said to Sam in Lord of the Rings. He said, we saved the Shire, but not for us. So at
Right.
the end of the day, if just all this work, stops wars 20 years from now, then so be it. But let's fight like,
Yeah.
you know,
And even if we can't change the course of history, or there's no way to measure any difference that we made, like overall in the scheme of things, you'll definitely see immediate and actual results from your audience where people say, hey, look, I learned a lot here and I used to be bad on this stuff and I'm not anymore. And I've been at this a long enough time that I've heard from a lot of soldiers. I've heard from a lot of war hawks and a lot of war hawk sons
Tucker
that, like,
Carlson.
this stuff turns people around. It really does. And so
Look at
it's worth the
Tucker,
effort. Yep.
and I give you credit. I give you and your friends and your crew, your cohorts credit for like Tucker's turn. And I have a lot of friends that are conservative leaders that call me and say, "How come my kids sound like you on Gaza? What propaganda are you and my children listening to?" I'm like, "No, it's what are you listening to? You're the propagandized one."
Yep.
And so many of these people over the past 2 years have called me and said, "Thank you for helping me maintain my relationship with my children and coming to understand the truth of this issue."
That's good, man. It's a perfect example of what I mean. And like I say, the course of macro events is probably outside of our reach, but that still counts anyway. And on the margin, even on the big ones, on the margin, we do make a difference. You know what I mean? I don't know if we can take credit for Trump changing his mind yesterday. There have been times where the people out in the country really were the margin in preventing our leaders from doing the worst things. And the biggest example of that is Obama in 2013 when he wanted to go to Syria. And it's true that there are people in his government who were skeptical, but the public was absolutely opposed. And he was like, whoa, I think really shocked at how opposed people were and decided, nah, forget it. So, it really does make a difference. I
And
know it does.
well, I'm going to put all of your links, antiwar.com, and the university link. What's the university link again?
ScottHortonAcademy.com.
And scotthortonacademy.com. We're going to put all your websites in the show notes. I would ask everyone, you should maybe we as an organization at VPP will take a class together and we
There
can
you go.
discuss it over at my Substack. But check out the show notes and sign up for the class. Scott, again, thank you for all your hard work. I know it's going to be a busy week, and I really appreciate you having me on your show. It really helped us. A lot of folks donated. A lot of people signed up for my Substack,
Great.
and because of my appearance on your show, we were able to raise some money to deliver more firewood into Gaza for the orphan communities and for the
Oh, that's
Christians.
great,
So,
man.
yeah, I really want to thank you for that. And even to this day, I'm getting people signing up for my Substack, and it says from Scott Horton Show. So I
Great.
can't thank you enough for that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, man. It's good to talk with you again, Jason.
All right, brother. Have a good night.
You too.
All right, guys. I am serious. Go in the show notes. Ritha, you got all that, right? We're gonna put that in the show notes. There's my lovely producer slash assistant, is conspiring as we speak behind my back to bring Sharia law to Texas. Is that true? They can't see you nod. I need to start putting you on camera. But I think maybe we can take these classes together. I'm really grateful for Scott Horton. And so sign up for a class at the Scott Horton Academy. I definitely am. I'm going to have me and all of my staff. We're going to pick one class and do it together. And maybe we can all do it together on my Substack and have discussion on that. This episode, I want to say before this show is my interview with the mayor of Bethlehem. And over the next week or so, next couple of weeks, we're going to be dropping interviews that I did in the West Bank. I'm going to have Lutheran pastor from Ramallah, an Anglican pastor from Ramallah, a Catholic priest from Tebe, the mayor of Ramallah, and others. And so those interviews will be going up. Make sure you share those because I think it is very important. I don't want to speak for these communities. They are well enough. They can do a much better job speaking and advocating for themselves. So I want you to hear from the mayor of Bethlehem. I want you to hear from the mayor of Ramallah. I want you to hear from Father Isa. I want you to hear from the priests and the pastors from across the West Bank. And so if you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe, but also go back and listen to my interview with the mayor of Bethlehem. Go to our website, vulnerablepeopleproject.com. Look at our work. We stand with the most vulnerable communities in the world when the world has walked away. Do you remember a couple weeks ago, everyone was like, oh, but Nigeria, we need to do something about Nigeria. And no more talk about that. We've been in Nigeria for years. We will be in Nigeria for years. We're in Nigeria now. In fact, just this week, we put 10 security guards in front of the most vulnerable school in Nigeria. And our goal is to add 100 churches and schools and hospitals in Nigeria this year, in our security protocol. We're continuing to bring food and shelter and firewood into Gaza, and we're going to be launching a big campaign next week. I'll give you a heads up. My goal is to do 150 prosthetic limbs for children in West Bank and Gaza between now and June. 150. This is the goal. To do that, it's going to cost me $150,000. We're going to be actually having the limbs made in the West Bank and we'll be showing you the facility where they make them with these printers, these 3D printers. It's an amazing thing that they can do. Technology has reached an amazing we're in an amazing place without a lot of money. Kids can walk again, they can run, they can play. And so this is our next big initiative, prosthetics to the children of Gaza. There are more, there are more children in Gaza. There are more amputee children in Gaza than in the whole world combined. Can you imagine? And so 150 isn't a lot. It's $150,000. It's a lot for us, but it means the world to each one of those children in that 150. So go to vulnerablepeopleproject.com. Check out what we do. If you like it, become a monthly donor. Give us your very best one-time gift. This is what allows us to do our work. All right, guys, until next time, it's the Jason Jones Show.